why is it that you and like almost everyone in today's world secretly fear achieving your absolute deepest ambitions?
Yeah, it's the ultimate psychological paradox, really. I mean, we spend decades chasing a goal, sacrificing our time, our energy.
Right.
But there's this deeply ingrained mechanism that causes us to just freeze or even deliberately sabotage ourselves the closer we get to the finish line.
Which makes no sense on the surface.
Exactly. We think we're just afraid of failing, but the reality is, far more complicated than that.
Right. And I want to spend our time today breaking down exactly why we do this, and more importantly, how the mechanics of this self-sabotage actually work.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
So to do that, we're doing a deep dive into the framework laid out in Paulo Coelho's book, The Alchemist. And the mission of this deep dive isn't just to recap a famous story. It's to extract the core psychology from it.
Right, the real meat of it.
Yeah, because the author suggests that there are 4 very specific internal obstacles standing between a person and their ultimate purpose, what he calls their personal legend.
Yeah, their personal legend.
So before we get to this bizarre fear of success, what are we even up against when we start? Like, what is obstacle number 1?
Well, the author identifies this sort of sequential gauntlet of psychological barriers, and obstacle number 1 is childhood conditioning.
Okay, meaning what exactly?
I mean, from the moment we are old enough to really understand the world around us, we are told that our biggest dreams are just impossible.
Right, like be realistic.
Exactly. You hear it from well-meaning parents, teachers, society at large. We just accumulate these layers of prejudice and fear until that original burning ambition is buried so deep we can barely even remember what it was.
Okay, but let's say I managed to dig that dream back up. I recognize the conditioning and I decide, you know what, I want to go after my ultimate goal anyway. What stops me then?
Well, then you hit obstacle number 2, which is love.
Yeah.
Or more accurately, the fear of hurting the people you love.
Oh, wow.
Right. Because you know what you want to do, but you feel this intense, paralyzing guilt. You think that pursuing your own path means you'll have to abandon your responsibilities or, disappoint your family.
You worry that your ambition is just inherently selfish.
Exactly.
I mean, I can totally see how that stops most people right in their tracks. But, okay, if I push past that, if I realize that true love shouldn't require me to just bury my ambition, I assume the next barrier is the fear of failure.
Precisely. Obstacle number 3 is the fear of defeat. When you finally commit to your dream, you are entirely exposed.
Right, no more excuses.
Yeah, you've stripped all those away. You can't use the classic defense mechanism of saying, oh, well, I didn't really try that hard anyway.
Because if you put everything on the line and you fail, it hurts infinitely more.
Exactly. The reality of failure becomes this terrifying prospect.
That makes logical sense, though. I mean, we fear failure because failure is painful.
Yeah.
But here's where I get genuinely confused.
Go on.
Let's say I survive that whole gauntlet. I ignore the cynics, I figure out a way to pursue my path without abandoning my family, and I weather those initial defeats. I am standing right at the finish line. The goal is literally within reach. Why on earth would I stop then?
Because you have hit the 4th obstacle, which is the fear of actually realizing the dream.
Wait, what?
Yeah, this is where Paulo Coelho provides this deeply counterintuitive yet, profoundly accurate insight into human nature. The mere possibility of getting exactly what we want fills us with a heavy subconscious guilt.
Guilt? Why would finally achieving what I've worked my whole life for make me feel guilty? I mean, that sounds crazy.
Well, think about the social dynamics of success, right? You look around at your friends, your family, your peers, most of whom honestly have compromised on their own dreams.
Yeah, that's true.
So when you are on the verge of actually doing the thing everyone else gave up on, you suddenly feel this immense pressure. You start thinking, who am I to get everything I ever wanted?
Oh, wow. So you worry that your success is going to alienate you from your community or that you just don't deserve the reward.
Exactly. It's an alienation fear.
So it's almost like a survival mechanism just going completely haywire. Like, we actively sabotage ourselves because standing out, even in a really positive way, feels socially dangerous.
Yeah. We renounce our own joy just to fit in with a world that largely settles for less. And this ties directly into a foundational concept from the book.
The world's greatest lie.
Yes. Introduced by an old king named Melchizedek, he calls it the world's greatest lie. And the lie is this deeply held belief that at a certain point in our lives, we completely lose control of our destiny and just have to surrender to fate.
Meaning we weaponize the idea of fate to basically avoid taking accountability for our own lives.
It is exactly it.
If I just say, well, it wasn't in the cards, I don't have to face the fact that I just gave up.
Right. And the author gives us this really heartbreaking illustration of this through the character of the crystal merchant in Tangier.
Yeah, the crystal merchant. He represents like the vast majority of humanity, doesn't he?
He really does. He runs this crystal shop on top of a hill, and business has been just agonizingly slow for decades, but he holds on to this one lifelong dream, which happens to be the 5th obligation of his faith.
Right, a pilgrimage to the holy city of Mecca.
Exactly, but he never goes.
And it's not because he lacks the resources, right? Because he admits to the main character, Santiago, that he has the money saved up.
Yeah, he has the money, he has the time. He could easily leave the shop in the hands of his employees.
But he intentionally, consciously chooses to stay on that hill. He tells the boy that the mere thought of Mecca is the only thing that keeps him alive through the daily grind.
Because he is terrified that if his dream is actually realized, he will have absolutely no reason to go on living.
That is so dark.
It is. He prefers the dream as an untouched ideal. He imagines crossing the desert, arriving at the plaza of the sacred stone, the prayers he would share. He wants the fantasy, but he completely refuses to take the step to make it real.
Okay, I am going to play devil's advocate here and push back on this a bit, because I can actually see the merchant's logic.
Really? Okay, let's hear it.
Is holding on to an idealized fantasy really a tragedy? Or is it just a highly effective psychological defense mechanism against real-world risk?
What do you mean?
Think of it like keeping a rare collectible toy in the box forever. If you never play with it, it can never break.
Right.
You never get the joy of playing with it, sure, but you also avoid the absolute devastation of ruining it.
The mint condition life.
Exactly. The crystal merchant knows that if he actually travels to Mecca, the reality could be awful. I mean, it might rain every day, he might get robbed, the people might be rude, or he might just feel totally empty when he arrives.
Right, the reality could fall short.
Yes. The reality could completely destroy the one beautiful thought that gets him out of bed in the morning. So keeping it in the box seems, rational.
I mean, it feels rational in the short term, sure, but that is the exact trap of the fourth obstacle. The defense mechanism you are describing guarantees a life of low-grade misery.
Low-grade misery?
Yeah. By protecting the toy in the box, people commit what Paulo Coelho calls stupid mistakes when their goal is only a step away.
Like what?
Like, we suddenly decide to pivot our careers out of nowhere, or we pick a fight with a mentor, or we just stop working. We protect the fantasy at the expense of our actual lives.
But we sabotage it.
Exactly. If the merchant went to Mecca and the trip was difficult, well, he would at least have lived it. He would have grown. The tragedy is that he ensures his everyday reality remains totally unfulfilling, relying purely on a ghost to sustain his spirit.
Wow. So we choose a comfortable misery over an unpredictable joy.
That's a great way to put it.
We would rather guarantee our own unhappiness than risk the possibility of disappointment. That is a tough realization. And honestly, uncovering those hidden traps we set for ourselves is exactly what we aim to do here. Welcome to Deep Cuts and Deep Thinking.
So the natural question to ask next is how we end up in the crystal merchant's mindset to begin with. Like, how does a person accept the world's greatest lie?
It doesn't happen overnight. It's a slow fade. And I think the answer to how we lose that childhood fire is hiding in plain sight at the very beginning of Santiago's journey before he even meets the old king.
When he's still a shepherd.
Exactly. He starts out as a shepherd and he has this sudden, jarring realization about his flock of sheep.
Right. He notices that they are entirely disconnected from the magic of the world around them.
Yeah, the sheep don't realize they're walking a completely new road every single day. They don't notice the changing of the seasons or the beauty of the Andalusian fields.
Their entire existence has just narrowed down to two biological imperatives, finding food and finding water.
So they've basically traded their awareness for basic survival, which makes you wonder, and I am asking you listening right now, are you the sheep in your own life?
That is the real question.
Have you allowed your world to shrink down to just paying the rent, buying the groceries, and waiting for the weekend? Have you completely forgotten how to rely on your own instincts because you traded your ultimate ambition for the absolute comfort of a predictable routine?
It's a powerful metaphor because the boy realizes that if he decided to just slaughter his flock one by one, they wouldn't even notice until it was too late.
That is terrifying.
It is. They have entirely outsourced their survival and direction to him. They traded their wild instincts for the security of knowing someone else will find the water, and humans do the exact same thing.
But the shepherd we surrender to isn't usually a person, right? We surrender our instincts to societal expectation.
Exactly.
So if outsourcing our instincts is the root cause, what does that actually look like in practice? Because I doubt people consciously wake up and decide to be sheep.
No, they don't. It usually happens under the guise of being responsible.
The responsible choice.
Right. Paulo Coelho illustrates this perfectly with the story of a baker in the village plaza. When this baker was a child, he desperately wanted to travel and see the world, just like Santiago.
But he didn't.
No. Instead of taking to the road, he chose to buy a bakery. He did this because society deems bakers more important and stable than wandering shepherds.
Right, bakers own homes. People respect them.
Exactly. He let the opinions of his neighbors dictate his entire life's trajectory.
This is the real-world manifestation of those first two obstacles we talked about. You have the childhood conditioning that dreams are impractical, combined with the fear of disappointing the social structure around you.
Yep.
And the long-term tragedy is that this man will spend his entire life making bread, peering out his window, knowing he traded his soul's true desire for social status.
He prioritized how his life looked to others over how it felt to himself.
Okay, but let's imagine someone who breaks the mold. Someone who refuses to be the baker, ignores the societal expectations, and actually goes after the dream. Are they safe from self-sabotage?
Not at all. In fact, the universe introduces a completely new test. You transition from the fear of starting right to the danger of giving up at the very end.
Oh, right. Obstacle number 4 again.
Yes. The old king tells Santiago an incredible story about a miner who abandons everything to search for emeralds.
Oh, this story is wild.
It is. He works a river for 5 entire years. He examines hundreds of thousands of stones. He is exhausted, beaten down, and his faith is entirely depleted. He is right at the point of giving up completely.
And according to the story, he is literally one stone away from his goal. But he has no way of knowing that.
Exactly. So in a fit of absolute anger and frustration at his 5 fruitless years, he picks up a rock and hurls it away. He throws it with such force that it shatters the stone it hits.
And there it is.
Yep. Embedded inside the broken pieces is the most beautiful emerald in the world.
Why does the breakthrough always seem to hide behind the moment of maximum frustration? Like, is there a psychological reason the universe demands that specific toll?
Well, the old king explains the mechanics of this journey beautifully. When you first start out, you often experience what he calls beginner's luck.
Right, that initial dopamine hit.
Exactly. The universe gives you a little taste of success to hook you, to show you that your dream is actually possible. But as you get closer to the ultimate goal, that luck vanishes.
The universe gets tough.
The universe will always fiercely test your resolve right before you achieve your dream. It wants to see if you have actually mastered the lessons you learned along the way, or if you were just riding a wave of initial enthusiasm.
So when things get impossibly hard right at the end, it's not a sign that you chose the wrong path. It's actually a signal that you are almost there. You have to push through the exact moment you want to quit.
Yes, absolutely. But frustration is only one reason people quit. There is another temptation that is even more powerful and much harder to recognize.
What happens when you find something along the way that is just good enough?
That is the ultimate trap. And in Paulo Coelho's book, that good enough is disguised as love.
Wow. Okay, so Santiago crosses the desert and arrives at an oasis. There, he meets a woman named Fatima, and he falls instantly and deeply in love with her.
Right.
Suddenly, the ultimate treasure he was seeking at the pyramids doesn't seem that important anymore. He wants to abandon his entire quest, stay at the oasis, and just be with her.
And from the outside, that feels like the noble thing to do, right? He's choosing love over ambition.
Exactly.
But he meets a mentor at the oasis, the Alchemist, who gives him a very stark warning. The mentor tells him that true love, the kind of love that speaks the language of the world, never keeps a person from pursuing their personal legend.
Meaning it shouldn't hold you back.
Right. If a relationship requires you to abandon your life's ultimate purpose, it is not true love. It is possession disguised as love.
The psychological fallout of staying is what really hits home for me. The mentor lays out exactly what will happen if Santiago stays out of fear of losing her.
It's a bleak picture.
It really is. For the first year or two, they will be happy. But eventually, the omens, those internal signs that guide him toward his destiny, they'll begin to whisper to him again.
And he will try to ignore them. But the regret will start to fester.
He will walk the sands of the desert at night, knowing he could have trusted his love for Fatima enough to leave and return.
Because he stops listening to the omens, they will eventually vanish entirely. He will become a wealthy, respected counselor at the oasis, sure, but he will live the rest of his days with a quiet, lifelong regret.
And Fatima will feel that she was the one who interrupted his quest, which will just completely poison their dynamic. Love must be an impetus to move forward, not a barrier to keep you safe.
Exactly. You have to leave to truly love her, because otherwise you end up resenting her.
But getting your logical mind to accept that is one thing, right? Getting your emotions to align is a whole other battle, because as Santiago gets closer to the end of his journey, his own heart starts rebelling.
Yes, it tries to convince him to turn back because, as it says, hearts don't like to suffer.
The personification of the heart here is brilliant.
It really is. The heart is terrified of losing everything it has gained. It wants to protect the boy from the pain of failure. But the alchemist offers a piece of wisdom that is arguably the core thesis of the entire journey.
What does he say?
He tells the boy, tell your heart that the fear of suffering is worse than the suffering itself.
I need to pause on that because it just completely flips our normal understanding of risk on its head. The fear of suffering is worse than the suffering itself.
Yeah.
So the author is suggesting that the mind's anticipation of a disaster is actually a heavier burden than the disaster itself.
Think about it. Think about how much energy a person expends dreading a difficult conversation or worrying about a massive career move or anticipating a failure.
It's exhausting.
It is psychological torture. Avoiding the risk is a chronic low-grade suffering that eats away at your soul for decades. The actual suffering that comes from taking a risk and failing, that is acute.
It happens, and then it's over.
Exactly. It hurts, but it passes and it leaves you stronger and wiser. No heart has ever truly suffered when it goes in search of its dreams, because the search itself is meaningful.
So the obstacle isn't the external world at all. The obstacle is entirely your own internal resistance to temporary pain.
Yes. And this brings us to the literal concept of alchemy.
Right, the title of the book.
In medieval times, alchemists attempted to purify base metals, specifically trying to turn lead into gold.
But the physical act of turning lead into gold was just the surface level, right? It was a cover for something deeper.
Yes, exactly. The true alchemists discovered that the purification of the metals was actually a metaphor for the purification of themselves.
Could you explain that?
Well, the lead represents the unrefined, fearful, conditioned self. To turn that lead into gold, you have to subject it to the fire of the journey. You have to strip away the 4 obstacles.
You burn away the childhood conditioning.
Yes.
The fear of hurting others, fear of defeat, and that lingering fear of success.
Exactly. And when you strip all of that away, what is left is the gold. What is left is your true, unburdened nature.
So the treasure at the end of the journey is almost like an excuse to get you to walk through the fire. The masterwork isn't a physical object. It's the person you become by refusing to give up.
Beautifully said. The desert, the tests, the betrayals, they are the fire that burns the impurities out of your soul.
So if we pull all these threads together, if the journey to your dream is essentially a process of burning away your own fears to purify yourself, what is the ultimate prize? Like, what happens when you finally strip away all the lead?
To understand the ultimate prize, we have to look at this brilliant twist on a classic myth found in the opening pages of Paulo Coelho's book.
The prologue, right?
Yeah, the prologue retells the myth of Narcissus, the youth who was so obsessed with his own beauty that he fell into a lake and drowned.
The standard cautionary tale about vanity.
Right. But the author changes the ending.
Yeah, how so?
After Narcissus drowns, the goddesses of the forest arrive and find that the freshwater lake has been transformed into a lake of salty tears.
So they assume the lake is weeping because it misses the beauty of Narcissus.
Exactly. But the lake surprises them. It says it never even noticed that Narcissus was beautiful.
Wait, what? Then why is it crying?
The lake says, I weep because each time he knelt beside my banks, I could see in the depths of his eyes my own beauty reflected.
Oh, wow. The lake wasn't looking at Narcissus. It was looking at itself through him.
Yes. When you pursue your personal legend, you might think you are chasing a physical treasure, or a career milestone, or a pilgrimage to Mecca. But the universe is actually using that desire to reveal your own untarnished soul to you.
That is incredible. So when you are chasing your ultimate dream, your personal legend, are you really just searching for a reflection of your true, unburdened self? And is the reason you're so afraid to achieve it, the reason you keep the toy in the box and listen to the world's greatest lie, simply because you are terrified of finally looking yourself in the mirror? If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe.